Episode 12, The Geometric Cascade. 1. The Veins of the Ghost. As Alara and Payne descended the curving ramps toward Zahn's position, Zahn continued deeper alone, his world shrinking to the narrow cone of his shoulder-mounted floodlights. While the others had been examining the command tier, he had pushed forward into the lower decks, hunting the heart of the failure. To him, the iridescence of the hull wasn't beauty. It was a material riddle. He moved down a sloping transit tube that felt less like a corridor and more like a frozen throat. The walls here were ribbed with the same ferrous nanoparticle lattice he'd detected at the airlock, but the concentration was higher. His mag boots felt heavy, the clack hiss resonating through his suit's boots with a deep metallic thrum that echoed back at him in the confined space. The light from his lamps caught on the ribbing, throwing sharp geometric shadows that danced ahead of him like living things. The air inside the chrysalis was still, perfectly still. No convection currents, no drafts, just the cold, dead pressure of a sealed tomb. Zahn's suit fans were the only sound, a constant low hiss that made the silence outside feel even more absolute. "I'm moving into the secondary ventral spine," Zahn reported, his voice a steady drone in the comms. "The geometry is shifting. It's getting tighter, more utilitarian. The bone-white finish is gone. This is raw structural matrix." The ship branched off into a dozen different capillaries, some leading to darkened alcoves, others to sealed circular hatches. Zahn ignored them, following the thickest bundles of golden filament. These weren't just wires. They were the ship's nervous system, and they were all converging toward a single point of gravity in the lower decks. Every few steps, he paused to run his probe along a rib or filament cluster. The scanner beeped softly. Trace readings, no surprises. The lattice was denser here, the nanoparticles more concentrated. It was structural reinforcement, not power conduction. Smart, efficient, the kind of engineering he respected. But it had failed. 2. The choke point. The path ended at a jagged aperture, a structural seam that had buckled when the hull flared outward. It wasn't a door, it was a wound. The gap was barely wide enough for a man in a pressurized SFDF suit. Zahn paused, checking his oxygen levels and suit integrity. "I've hit a constriction point. Looks like a bulkhead shifted during the decompression. I'm going to have to squeeze through." "Be careful, Zahn," Alara's voice crackled, distant but now moving toward him. "We don't know how stable that section is." Zahn didn't answer. He turned sideways, his chest plate scraping against the cold, iridescent ribbing. The sound was a horrific high-pitched screech that traveled through his suit, the sound of metal on ceramic in a vacuum. He exhaled, collapsing his lungs to gain an extra inch, and pushed. For a second, he was wedged, the weight of the 350-meter alien graveyard pressing in on him from every direction. The suit creaked, his ribs protested. Then with a sudden pop of his shoulder joint against the frame, he slid through. He stumbled forward, catching himself on a ribbed support. His breathing was hard, not from exertion, but from the sudden release of pressure. He straightened, sweeping his lamp across the chamber beyond. 3. The engineering sanctum. He stumbled into a vaulted chamber that took his breath away. Unlike the midsection breach, which was littered with debris and frozen amber fluid, this room was eerily, clinically clean. The chamber was dominated by a central spire made of a translucent, glass-like material. Surrounding it were 6 secondary pedestals, but they weren't for pilots. They were docking stations for the power relays. Zahn's light swept the room. "I'm in. Engineering, it's pristine. It's like the vacuum scrubbed it, but I see the failure point." One of the secondary pedestals was a blackened ruin. The glass-like material had been turned into a jagged, soot-stained crater. The harmonic shells hadn't just failed, they had detonated with a focused, directional force. The outward blast Alara had seen from the fetch wasn't a single explosion. It was the result of this relay screaming its energy directly into the hull's internal supports. Zahn moved closer, careful not to disturb the floating debris. The floor was polished to a mirror finish, reflecting his lamp in perfect distorted arcs. No dust, no scorch marks beyond the pedestal itself. The vacuum had erased everything else. He knelt beside the ruined docking station. The blackened crater was perfectly circular, edges curled outward like burned paper. The harmonic shell had ruptured from within, venting plasma in a single catastrophic pulse. The force had ripped through the relay mounts, through the floor plating, through the support ribs, and kept going until it hit the hull. 4. The unfinished task. Zahn moved closer, his boots clicking softly on the polished floor. Floating in the zero-gravity center of the room were 3 intact relays. They looked like oversized, multifaceted emeralds, encased in a web of golden filigree. They weren't broken. They were waiting. They were mid-swap, Zahn whispered, reaching out a gloved hand to steady one of the floating units. It drifted away from his touch, spinning lazily. The crew, they knew the cascade was happening. There are maintenance tools still magnetically locked to the floor near the blast site. They had the replacements ready. They were trying to pull the failing unit when the bottle lost containment. He looked at the blackened pedestal. Beside it, a single plum-skinned hand, severed at the wrist by the force of the decompression, was still gripped around a calibration tool. The fingers were locked in position, knuckles white even in death. Zahn stared at the hand for a long moment. The tool looked like a precision torque wrench, similar to the kind he carried in his own kit. The grip was firm, practiced. This wasn't panic. This was training. Muscle memory, an engineer fighting to the last second to save the ship. He looked up at the massive spire. Without the relays, the ship was a corpse. The central glass-like core was dark, inert. No spark, no hum, no residual energy, just a silent dead heart. Alara Payne, Zahn said, his voice dropping an octave. They weren't just scholars or navigators. They were engineers, and they died trying to keep this heart from stopping. Alara's voice came back soft but steady. We're almost there. Hold position. Payne's voice followed, calm but heavy. They died fast. The decompression wave would have hit before they could even scream. But they were still trying, right up to the end. Zahn reached for the calibration tool still clutched in the severed hand. He didn't touch it, just studied the angle of the grip, the position of the fingers. It was the same way he held his own tools when time was running out. They almost made it, he said quietly. A few seconds earlier, and maybe the shell holds. A few seconds later, and the relay swap finishes. But they were right in the middle. Wrong place, wrong time. He stood, toolkit clanking softly. I'm marking the relay positions for recovery. If we want to understand how it worked, these are the pieces. But we're not touching anything until we map the whole cascade path. One wrong move, and we could trigger a secondary failure in the chrysalis. He swept his lamp one last time across the chamber. The silence was absolute. No hum, no spark, no echo. Just a dead heart and the hand that had tried to save it. The cascade was over. The ship was gone. And the story it left behind was written in the positions of tools and bodies that never made it home. This concludes today's SFDF log. If you want to ensure our signal remains strong across the sector, please hit the like button and subscribe to join the crew. Your support helps us keep the mission alive. Don't forget to hit the bell so you never miss a transmission. We drop new episodes every Tuesday and Friday at 1800. Until then, keep your mag boots locked. End transmission.